All right, Jason, let's get this podcast started, man. I really appreciate you joining me. I'm here with Jason Scott, the first vice president at Alliant, and we were just chatting about what that means exactly. Would you mind sharing with us what first vice president is?
Yes. To me, it doesn't matter at all. Okay. We've talked about this. I think that titles are way overrated. Sure. I always tell people, what are you? Are you a broker? Are you a consultant? Are you a producer? I'm like, call me whatever you want.
Yeah.
At Alliant, they have those titles really to represent the type of equity that you're able to buy into or be provided as a partner, because Alliant's a privately held company and 53% owned by its employees. And so really all that means is that I've reached a certain level of equity allowance, if you will. Well,
the reason I bring it up is that's the first time I've seen first vice president. So I was like, what does that mean? I really want to unpack. And I guess I draw the equivalent, right, of an senior vice president or SVP. But I just wanted to ask you because that is, again, the first time I've seen it. So we're gonna go back and cover the consulting world. It's been a while since I've covered this. I've had a couple consultants on from Mercer and Hotchkiss and the like, but we were really sales focused. And I do want to spend some time talking to you about sales because I think obviously you have the acumen for it. But I do want to talk about the world of consulting, benefits consulting, touch on that subject matter again. But before we do that, Jason, got a chance to know you over coffee this morning, but want to kind of recap a little bit of your backstory. Who are you? What are you all about? And some of your career as well. So floor is yours.
Yeah. I mean, the short version is I started a company in Chicago with a couple buddies right out of college, out of Texas Tech. It got to be November. We did not want to spend another winter in Chicago.
Okay.
So we moved back to Dallas. I started working for a company called Paycom, which is now large and publicly traded. At the time, they were small. They had 2 locations, Oklahoma City and Dallas. Good payroll company. They offered me a unique opportunity to call on certain territories. Okay. And, my first territory was terrible, right? You got to earn your way up.
Of course. Yep.
Eventually, over 6-7 months, I was able to move. And then I cold called my way into a firm that's now owned by MMA, but it was called MHBT, Macquarie Henry Bulls Troy.
Okay.
Great.
So you were seeking to sell MHBT at the time payroll services.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the kind of the funny part of the story is that when I started calling on MHBT, they were a very good, established regional firm. And I just loved them, and they were great people. They kept having me back in to present the same thing. Okay. And every time I would go in there was new people in there. And I'm looking.
So I'm presuming, just based on your facial expressions, that's not the normal.
It's totally not. Normal.
Okay.
I'm like, why is this guy? This guy has nothing to do with payroll. What on earth is he doing? Yeah. So stupid me. I finally was like, okay, maybe there's something more to this. What's going on here? The 4th time I got called in. After the presentation, the HR director pulled me aside and said, as a baseball guy, he knew I'd played baseball, and he said, "Jason, you hit a home run, but it's not going to show up in the box score." And I was like, "Okay, cool. I don't know what that means."
Yeah, that sounds good, but bad simultaneously.
I was like, "So you're not? I'm intrigued. Buying Paycom? You've had me in 4 times, and I've met 30 people. This is weird." And he said, "No, we're not going to do that. But we want to buy you." Huh. And at the time, MHBT had hired a few young guys before, all from the insurance industry, though. This was the first time that they had made the decision to venture outside of that. So I started what became known as kind of the young guns there, and started the training program and started learning benefits.
So you probably did you have any experience understanding the benefits prior? Okay.
None. We used to refer benefits to a small regional broker, and all I ever knew is that if a client asked me, I made the introduction. Okay. I knew nothing about it. Yeah. So I get in there.
Well, I got to go back in the story. I don't want to derail you, but as you get presented this notion, like you find out they were effectively testing and recruiting you over the course of 4 calls. Were you surprised? Were you excited? What did you think about the offer at first?
So it's interesting because I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And so the idea of selling commercial insurance, I didn't have any friends that did it. I didn't have any friends' dads that had been successful doing it.
Sure.
So it's not like
I was foreign to you.
I was looking at commercial real estate. I have 40,000 friends in commercial real estate. All of them wanted to be in it because they had a friend whose dad made a lot of money, right? This was not the case with commercial insurance. I didn't know anything about it. But what I did know is that when I set my first meeting with them, we're going in, cold calling sessions and yada, yada. And I'm reporting, I'm like, I set a meeting with this insurance company called MHBT, and my boss at the time just like flipped out. He was like, how'd you get in there? That is the best company in the world. I love them. And he was 35 at the time. I was 23. And I remember he said, if I could do my entire life over, I would try to be a broker for them.
No kidding.
And I was like, wow, this company must be pretty awesome.
That's cool.
And then 4 meetings later, I got the opportunity to do that. Now he wasn't thrilled that I did that, but at the same time, what's he going to say? He's literally telling me that this is what he wanted to do.
Yeah, he essentially made the decision for you ahead of time.
So I took a big leap of faith and went over and started selling insurance. And at the time, they were like, okay, do you want to sell property and casualty or do you want to sell employee benefits? I was like, I don't know what those are. What are you talking about? You know? And I was like, all right, well, can I just maybe dip my toe in both and see, at least let me see which one I like. And the firm at the time had a lot of younger guys. They were in their, mid 30s to mid 40s that I really liked, that were fun. And they'd take me out and we'd go to happy hours and golf and stuff like that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go on the benefits side because at least these guys are younger and cooler and yada, yada. And they were unique in our industry. At that time, this is back in 2006, 2007, most benefits consultants were older.
Okay.
MHBT just had a couple that were younger. And so I was really attracted to that as well. And we can talk about this later in the podcast, but what I loved was the idea that you had this entire sect of brokers or consultants or whatever you want to call them that hated the idea of change. They liked the idea of putting their 500 life client on a Blue Cross ASO program and renewing them every year.
Yep.
And the 12 different things that you can maneuver and levers you can pull within the program, they didn't really want to do that. They just wanted to get their commission. Back then, people were getting paid commission on groups like that as opposed to fees.
Yep.
So they were just getting rich and fat and happy. And so I don't blame them. And then when 2010 hit and Obamacare, ACA passed, and that changed everything.
Yeah.
That changed
what's that term? Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. There's a point, right, where you can do that for so long before, whether it's a new generation or new ideas come behind you and sort of undercut whatever you've been doing to rest on your laurels for that period of time with something that's this different. So were you attracted or gravitated towards that younger consulting crew that had some of these fresher or newer ideas to you, or what?
That's exactly right. Okay. I mean, innovation in this industry has become so paramount. It's necessary and it's fun. Right? It's health insurance. Okay.
Well, you told me I want to ask you later on about your being a health insurance nerd, but I can tell you actually do enjoy it, which is refreshing.
That was the thing that I really wanted to decide. So as I started sitting down and going through policies and things that we can do to add value, and I'm looking at the property and casualty side of things, there's a lot of positives on that side. And I have a lot of friends on that side and they do very well and they're great and they love it. But I'm reading through these policies. I'm like, I can't even physically make it through one page. So boring.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
But on the benefits side, I was seeing them do things from an analytics standpoint, and I was just seeing the creativity and the desire that these companies now had based on ACA to offer benefits or to make benefits something that they're really wanting to use as an attraction and retention tool. That I just loved it. I loved doing something that wasn't deemed by my clients as a necessary evil.
Yeah.
And so and that's still to this day when I am vetting a prospect on whether or not we want to work with them. That's one of my major questions is what are you offering this program for? And if their response is we just have to be compliant, then I know almost every broker in town, I'm happy to refer you to any one of them.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned there is an art to it. That's what attracted me to self-funding, especially is I still to this day, and you talk about being a benefits nerd, framed on my office wall at my home office is a picture of a dashboard I created in Excel, which a bunch of claims reportings and percentage going to RX. But it was just because I got sort of carte blanche at the firm I was working at to just go, hey, design us a dashboard. Let's think about the most important reports and let's have something that's visually appealing and captivating to support all the numbers behind it. And I thought, oh, wow, cool. I've got finance and I've got creativity simultaneously combined. And so I just leaned into that really heavily. And it is very creative, man. I agree with you there.
Well, with the first time that we got to see PlanSight and what you guys were doing, I was fascinated by it because there's a level of, there's a floor. Like there's certain things like if you're not doing this, then you don't add value. So you have to do this. And most companies that do anything like what you guys do, their goal is to be at the floor. Like they're providing spreadsheets.
Yes.
They're providing this, but there's really no creativity. And what I really liked about your approach is that you were kind of I left that first meeting being like, this guy likes what he does. And he actually made something that's really boring kind of sound fun.
Well, that's cool, man.
And that's it, right? And so we share that. And that's what, that's what the whole mentality is that you're going to sit in on a pre-renewal strat meeting with one of your clients. It's going to be an hour and a half. You're going to dig through a lot of analytics and a lot of data to make them, the CFO is always going to be interested, right? Because ultimately it's a big number.
Yeah.
But to make everybody else interested in it is not easy, right? It can get kind of boring. So becoming an insurance nerd was kind of my way of learning enough and knowing enough. And again, I credit my mentors, Travis Sartons and Kirk Johnsons and Marcus Humphreys of the world, as the people that led me into this, because I saw the way they did it and I enjoyed sitting in their meetings.
Yep.
And I just,
By
said,
the way,
okay,
I got Travis coming on next week.
do you really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
He was, I don't know if we talked about this. He was like my number one mentor.
No kidding.
I loved him. I saw him last week. I hadn't caught up from him in a while. Loved him. I had two major mentors. I had Travis and I had a guy named Kirk Johnson. I was just with Kirk 2 weeks ago at a trip down in San Antonio. And I told them this. I tell people this all the time. I said, they both served very good purposes.
Good. Yeah.
Travis taught me all the technical stuff.
Okay.
He taught me like the stuff you need to actually be a broker.
Yeah.
Kirk taught me all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Right. How to work with carriers and how to work with vendors and,
the relationship side of it.
Yeah. I remember the very first golf tournament that I played in with Kirk. He pulled me aside afterwards and he said, Jason, did you have fun? I said, that was a blast, man. He goes, okay, you got to get better at golf. I said, okay. Played baseball my whole life. Let's see what I can do.
I've erred on the side of never actually touching golf, so I don't have to expose how terrible I am. Well, before we go too far, man, I want to come back to consulting.
Yeah,
obviously.
sorry. Yeah.
No. We get into it, man, and this is natural. That's what happens. The story I want you to tell, just because I think it's so unique and cool, is about you said your dad helped introduce the so was it Tajin, right? Tajin. Yeah. Spice to the U.S. effectively, or popularize it. So one, can you tell us what it is for the people that don't know? And two, how the heck did your dad do that?
Yeah, that's and I love my dad, and he's been in sales forever. And he's the one that first taught me when I got into sales going into Chicago. Don't take maybes. Maybes are the worst thing you can get. You want a yes or you want a no. Okay. And you don't want to hear no. But if you do hear no, at least that means you can now move on to the next one.
Of course.
Maybes are what drag you out and get you behind quota, right? And I always valued that advice. And it's really become much more prevalent in my day-to-day now that, there's a book of business and you can start kind of being choosy about who you work with, as opposed to when you're first starting and you're kind of just desperate and you're like, anybody, I don't care, I'll do anything. I just need the business. So maybes, as you're starting off, will just drag on forever and they'll ruin your career.
Yeah.
So he started with Tajin, with MexiLink, and then and his product was Tajin, and nobody knew what it was unless you were in the Hispanic community. You probably never heard of it before. Yep. So he started pitching it. And they tried a lot of different stuff. He was going to big bars, and saying, hey, can you make this something that you rim glasses with? Yeah. I mean, he was doing anything he could. And then
I looked it up. I think it's lime chili powder and salt, sea salt, or something
basically,
like that. Yeah. We're in Texas, right? So anybody's listening not in Texas, they're literally in every gas station, on the counter when you check out. Yep. I knew exactly what you were talking about the second you told me this story. But back in that time, so he was introducing this new product, completely new product,
which is hard because shelf space is very difficult anywhere you go to, grocery store. A restaurant, anything, right? It's hard to get that space. And so they had a little bit of trouble at first, but he ultimately, this is back again, when President Obama was in office, and Michelle Obama did her whole healthy eating initiative.
I remember this,
right?
Yeah.
And with all due respect, and obviously not going to get political or anything, but if you ask my dad why he was successful, and I'll get into his success, he gives all credit to her.
Really?
Which is kind of weird. Why would she have any? Well, respectfully, she made the food in these public schools so terrible that the kids weren't eating it. And so he finally went in at this one trade show, and it was the Chicago ISD was the first one. Coincidentally, it had nothing to do with me living there, obviously. And they were like, here's the deal. Our kids won't eat the food.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, what if we you have a salt packet, a pepper packet, ketchup packets, mustard packets. What if we put a Tajin packet there? And now all this terrible food, you can put Tajin on it, and at least in the communities where you have large Hispanic populations, they'll love it.
Yeah.
They'll start eating it.
Yeah.
And it took off.
No kidding.
Within 2 years, he had 48 of the 50 largest school districts in the country, including the ISD, and the U.S. military as clients.
U.S. military as well.
Yep.
Wow.
So every military base has Tajin.
And I will confess, I believe I've tried it. I can't remember a specific time. I know it's a little sour, right? Because it's got the lime juice in it. But what is the most common application for drinks, right? Alcoholic beverages?
So candidly, I'm not the biggest fan.
You're not either?
Yeah. I love it because it provided our family with
of course,
but it's really popular on fruit. It's really popular to rim glasses on. People will put, I mean, it is the utilization of it now has just blown up.
Yeah.
And way more than what, my dad or his team could have ever thought it would be.
That's amazing though.
But it's like anything else. People start, I look at, I always joke around. I compare it to, that Red's hot sauce. You remember those?
Yeah.
Those commercials? Like I put that on everything.
Yeah.
That's kind of what Tajin's becoming. It's like, I'll put it on anything.
That's funny.
And so.
I do remember, because it was like pizza or something. Like I remember them putting on red hot sauce on pizza. And that's wild. You told me that. I'm like, no way. Because I can picture the bottle. It's that red and green Tajin sitting on the counter of a gas station. So did you get your kind of sales prowess from him? Like,
yeah,
did he teach you about sales? Like
he taught me the important part of sales, which was how to successfully sell without being salesy. And that was something that a lot of mentors have taught me, but something that my dad is my initial and kind of first mentor really taught me a lot of, which was if you have a product. And another thing is, going back to benefits consulting, one thing that was a big trend for a while was a lot of the big shops. If you look at kind of the top, let's call them 10, big Alliant type shops across the country, you started seeing a lot of beating down of fees. And, he was one of the people that taught me initially, like, if you have something of value, don't beat down the price for it.
Yeah.
And if somebody else is, then they're probably watering down the value. And that's something at Alliant. I don't want to get onto Alliant too much. This is certainly not a pitch for them, but it's something that they got really early on, that the real value is the clients, right? That's their happiness, the retention of them. So for me, as a sales consultant, if I'm put into a scenario where I have to make a decision, do I want to sacrifice commission in order for my client to get access to a resource? Now I have to make a moral decision. And I hated that. I hated the idea that, okay, if I really want to get this type of resource, I have to give up 2%. If they want to get this, and all of a sudden, my whatever percent I'm getting is down 10%. Well, now that client's not making me as much money, how much do I care about it? I just didn't like that.
Yeah.
And Alliant realized, okay, well, let's build out a model where every client we have can access our resources without you having to make a sacrifice. And part of that goes back to my saying of, do you understand your value? So what we're not going to do at Alliant is we're not going to go ahead and say, okay, well, your current broker is making $250 on you guys on this account. We'll do it for $245. That's not like, that doesn't make any sense. Or, X broker is competing on this business and they're throwing $150,000 number at you. Like, okay, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
If you should be paying your broker $250,000 and you're paying him $150,000, what's the expectation?
Well, that's just it. Yeah, and that's why I was telling you over coffee that I like the model that allows a compensation arrangement, a fee for that service rather than a commission. One, it takes the alignment of incentives off a bigger renewal means I get a bigger paycheck.
Yep.
But two, like you said, it actually demonstrates here is the value what I promised to deliver to you, and here is the cost associated with that value. Of course, there's profit built in, but if you start fixating just on the fee, like you said, then you get fixated on the price, which means you get fixated on what I can deliver, and all of a sudden you start to diminish that value that you can deliver. But I think it demonstrates to an employer, if you want to accomplish these things, here's also what it costs. Here's what you probably don't know is built into your commission or into your premiums right now, and probably
100%.
even more than that. So again, it just treats it as a proper transaction, in my opinion, and you're paying the right person and you're being paid by the right person rather than it being built into the premium itself. So I'm totally on board with you there. This podcast is brought to you by True Captive Insurance, a premier medical stop-loss captive for employer groups ranging from 25 to 1,000 employees. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. That's why they take a white glove approach, making it easy for employer groups to transition into a program built specifically for them. Check them out at truecaptive.com. I want to ask you about what kind of your position right now, because I think it's really interesting. You are somewhat of the consultant's coach, if you will, or what is the best way to define kind of what you do? You train and you guide the other consultants, correct?
We have, when we opened and we were bought by Alliant, same time CLS was. And I learned a lot from that experience. My boss, Clint, and kind of his right-hand man, Dana, have just been invaluable to me in terms of learning the things I need to know. So what I did when that acquisition happened is I had to learn Alliant, but then I also had to learn CLS. I kind of had to learn both.
Okay.
And so I got really in the weeds on what resources we offer, why are these differentiators, and I'll share a quick story with you on CLS here in just one second. But ultimately, Alliant's model, and we've continued this in Dallas, is good or bad, we only hire brokers that have been uberly successful wherever they're at. And so, the bad there is that we don't have, or good, depending on how you want to look at it, we don't have 50 young 25-year-olds that don't know anything about insurance shotgunning our name out there and cold calling, right?
Yep.
I like to think of us, especially here in Dallas, as kind of like the silent ninja, right? I really don't want...
It's like stealth mode, kind of. Yeah,
right?
I get it.
But Alliant being, a over $3 billion firm, and with the employee benefits division alone being $1 billion piece of it, there's just a lot of stuff they've done. And they're so far ahead of the curve right now when it comes to analytics, when it comes to pharmacy, when it comes to data. These guys that we have brought over recently from Lockton and Holmes Murphy and all these really respected shops, they come over because there's really good opportunity there and the people are great. But the real, and the equity opportunity is amazing and yada, yada. But I'm not here to sell Alliant. What I'm here to say is that they come over and these shops are really good places to work that have really good consultants. And then they see what we're doing and they're like, oh, this is light years above where we're at right now. And that's what Alliant has focused their model on, right? So when you have that powerful of resources behind you, and then you can bring in multi-million-dollar producers to sell it, then you have a perfect scenario there. So let's say we bring someone on and they have a $3 million book and they've been doing it for 15 years and people love them and they have a great reputation and yada, yada. Well, they get onto Alliant, the first thing they're going to know is, I have all these resources. How do I access them? What do I do? So one of the things I've taken on as kind of the FVP there or whatever is, along with Jill Hollowell, is making sure that they understand how to access these resources. Your experience, I'm sure you found this in mine. If somebody runs a division, let's say you're trying to access our private equity due diligence, right? You can send an email and call the head of that division, but it might be a week before that guy gets back to you.
Sure.
And that guy's going to end up introducing you to one of his guys anyway. So who's the person that you call to get it done now? And those are the kind of things within our pharmacy division, within our data, with our informatics division, with everything. I'm like, here's who you should call. Here's the person that's actually going to get it done for you. And here's what that resource looks like. And so I don't get paid anything additional for that, but the value there is that we're continuing to grow the office and it has accelerated the growth of these already incredible consultants that we're bringing on. So,
well, what you're describing kind of reminds me of a recent guest I had on. I had some folks on from Agility Innovation Partners, and what they do is they went out and sort of vetted what they thought was the best data analytics platform, which they chose Innovu. But what they sell in addition to that is the consulting side. So it's one thing to have something like an Innovu at your disposal. It's another thing to know actually how to use it, right? Because some of these engines are very powerful and they have a learning curve just like any software does. And so what good is a very powerful tool if you can't even turn it on or you can't 100%. Even... So their whole mentality is kind of what you were describing, is that you need somebody to actually show you what to do, kind of guide you through the process. And it sounds like a lot of what you were doing internally at Alliant. Let me ask you then, did you discover you had a knack for this type of skill, being the guy that knows how to coordinate these different departments and things?
My friends make fun of me because they say that I like everybody. That's what they say. How it's okay for you to not like somebody. Well, there's very few people exactly that I don't really like, but what I really love, and this translates into coaching kids and stuff of that, is I love seeing really good people have even more success, because I'm there to help them, right? But the only reason I have that mentality is because when I started in this industry, I knew nothing about this, and I had really good people that were willing to do that for me. And so it's kind of the pay it forward type mentality, right? I mean, I show my appreciation for the things that people did for me in the past by continuing to do that for other people in the future. So it's not just repaying those people. It's more of the, again, kind of the pay it forward mentality.
Well, that's servant leadership in a nutshell. It's kind of what you're talking about. Yeah.
And again, I'm very picky about who I will spend my time with and who I will work with and for. I worked for amazing people at MHBT. When I made the very difficult decision when MMA bought them, and I think I may have mentioned this to you, I had an extremely benevolent offer to stay. I made the decision to go with a very heavy heart, right? Because I loved them and they'd given me every opportunity in the world. The company that I landed with was Crystal & Company, and the big selling factor for me there were some obvious things. Opening the benefits division of Dallas was great. They were a large 13 office, $200 million firm at the time, where MHBT was like 75 million, something like that. So there was some similarities, some advantages. But I loved my boss, loved him. When Alliant bought us, there was I was at opening day, Rangers opening day, with Hartford. Okay. And my boss, again, Todd, who I love, calls me. He's like, "Hey, listen, people like to put things in baseball terms for me because I'm a baseball guy and it's easier for me. They're like, "Hey, I've decided that I'm kind of trading you." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "But trust me, I'm getting a lot of value for you." He goes, "But effective here in 2 weeks, you're going to report to Clint Scott."
Okay.
And I remember sitting there after I probably 4 or 5 drinks into the tailgating of opening day. And he goes, "I just want to let you know that this doesn't affect our relationship. I love you, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to explain it to you." And I go, "No." He's like, "Well, you can't just say no like it." I was like, "No, it's not happening." And he was like, "Would you?" Okay. He's like, "I get it. Would you mind doing me a favor and at least meeting him before you just say no?"
Okay.
All right, fair enough. Yeah. So I met him and we had breakfast about a couple days afterwards. And I called Todd afterwards and I go, "Hey, Todd, I've actually made the decision that I'm never working for you again. I'm only working for him."
That's really awesome. Yeah.
Oh, I said, "He's so bad." Are we allowed to?
Yeah, you can say whatever.
Okay. I said, Clint's, this is what I always tell people. Clint's so badass that he's kind of badass that badasses think he's badass.
That's
what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've always thought, so highly of him, but he didn't come in with a "I'm your boss" mentality, and he never has. I've never once in the now almost 4 years I've worked for him had a phone call from him where he said, "What's going on with this?" Or "What are you doing?" Or any type of every phone call is, "Hey, just checking in, seeing if there's anything I can do to help you."
Yeah.
That's servant leadership, right? That's the kind of leadership that I think really inspires people like me to go out and write business. That and internal competition, right?
Yeah.
I love my colleagues. I love them dearly. But when I see, there's a lot of shops where if you go out and sell $100,000 in revenue for a year, they think you're fantastic. You go out and sell 300,000, you're like a godlike figure to them, right? On our team, if you go sell 350 in a year, you're probably finishing last.
Okay.
And that's the kind of quality of people. And we have guys writing over $1 million in new business annually.
Yeah.
And they're awesome and they're supportive, right? But when you see these things go on, if you're a competitor, it has to inspire you.
Sure.
It has to inspire you a little bit, right? And so you can make a really good living going and selling $250,000 of new business a year. You can be a very successful consultant or producer, whatever you want to call it. But there's something, but if you're really good, and you're selling 250 and you're finishing dead last, there's something wrong there.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So.
Well, that's what I shared with you, before we were getting set up. I went from Drury University to SMU in soccer.
Yeah.
And I experienced going kind of a big, I don't want to call it big fish. I don't want to inflate my ability, but I was really good. Started as a freshman, like almost every game. And it was clear that I was able to establish myself very early on that level I was at least very good at. And so I was going, could I go higher up? And so had some friends at SMU, had a coach that put in a good word, got to go to SMU. And at that time they were third in the nation or something crazy like that. But I had a very eye-opening moment. Here I thought I was pretty good. And then I show up and there's 30 guys that are better than me, or at least on par with me. And that was the first experience I've had where I was probably at the bottom of the pecking order and going, wow, it was a little overwhelming. But then you eventually go, well, if I'm going to participate at this level, I am going to have to step up. And so you go through periods of growth. And ultimately that it was a little bit too much of a reach for me. But I understand the correlation between the competition in sports and the competition in production and sales. As long as it's healthy, as long as there's not like really perverse incentives and some immoral activities going on, that I think it does bring out the best, because you don't want to look up at that scoreboard and be the guy or gal at the bottom of the list. This podcast is sponsored by PlanSite. PlanSite is a technology for employee benefits brokers to more efficiently manage their RFP process for any group size, all funding types, and over 20 benefit lines and point solutions. PlanSite is the only end-to-end RFP technology on the market today. Let's modernize your RFP process together. Check us out at plansite.com.
I mean, not because they're going to be like rude to you or anything, but you're just going to get down on yourself. I mean, anything you do, if you're finishing last, you're going to get down on yourself.
Sure.
The irony is you can go to basically any other shop in town and you'll be towards the top doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
well, but that's just
a different
to the culture, right? And not even necessarily Alliant culture, although obviously you guys have sought to build a very healthy culture even at your size, based on some of the things you share. But what is it about culture to you that is so important in an organization like that?
It's everything.
Okay.
It is everything. Bill Henry, my old boss, he used to call people PLUs, people like us. I took that very much to heart and have continued with that tradition. When we're looking at bringing people on, there's a lot of vetting that goes involved. We're bringing on a new producer. I think they think it's like a 3-interview process, and that's what's happening. I don't think they realize we're making 75 phone calls on the back end.
Oh, really?
We're calling every carrier. We're calling clients of theirs. If it doesn't come back 100% flawless in their reputation, they're not going to work for us.
No kidding. Yeah.
I mean, it is so important. I mentioned earlier that our goal is not to broadcast Alliant out there, right? It's not to do that. And a lot of that is because what we don't want is for anybody to call on a company here in Dallas or anywhere and then be like, oh, yeah, I knew a guy from there and didn't like him.
Yeah.
Like, we're striving for that to never happen. There are, and again, like I have friends everywhere, and it is what it is. If you're around enough and you don't go through that long of a vetting process for your culture, inevitably you're going to have scenarios where you have a bad apple. We're doing everything we can to prevent that.
Yeah, sure.
So when it comes to production, that's where we sit. Now, when it comes to team culture, I think that's even more important. So if you don't mind, I'd like to spend a second on this.
Please.
This is really where the rubber meets the road. Our team and the people that we have on our team. So you would say, like, why would you want to come work at Alliant? If you're not a producer or if you're not going to get equity, why would you want to come work at Alliant? Other than that, we pay very well, take that away. And the response that we constantly get is, I'm working 80 hours a week at the place I'm working right now. What I want to do is I want to build a culture, and you can ask my account executive, Catherine, is the whole world when it comes to our book of business. She does so much and she's so good. Like Clint's mentality towards me, I've never once called her and said, hey, why aren't you doing this? Or what is this going on? It is 100% always giving her the benefit of the doubt, always having her side. By the way, always doing that over having the client's side, right? Your employees need to be your first priority. I know that sounds weird. Most people, clients top, and they are obviously extremely important. They're what's driving the revenue. But your employees, the people that work with you, and that's why I don't say for you, I say with you, they have to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, if you put your employees first, their quality of life, the environments which you've created will reflect in the way that they service and support your
100%.
clients. So, but if you do the opposite, right, that will also be reflected in their interactions with the client, and then the reputation you have and all those things will suffer because of it, right? So you take care of your employee. It's kind of like filling your cup first, right? And then when it overflows, you have the ability to go and support other people. If your cup is not filled and it's constantly empty and you're putting it out in the world to everybody else, you're not really representing yourself properly to the world, and you're not giving your full self because you have neglected yourself. So I think it's the same mentality, just at a little bit more of a macro level.
It is, I agree. And it is, it's something that has to be across the board. Culture is not something that you can really drive in as your number one issue like we do. It's our number one most important thing is our culture. Mm-hmm. Can't do that if you don't have 100% of your team on that same page. Mm-hmm. You can't have one person over here operating one way. You can't have one person where an account executive or account manager or someone like that's like, I don't want to work for that person. You can't have that person there. It should be a scenario where everybody wants to work with everybody because you have a great team in place. And I'll transition just for a second away from the business space to more of the personal baseball space, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So really, really proud of my two little boys. They're 7 and 9. They play 8U and 10U baseball, and they play for a very high level. And we have 11 kids on my younger team, and we have room for one. We had room for one more kid. 12 is kind of the max that you're going to keep on a roster. Sure. And so I had a dad come to me, and he's like, "Hey, I got this kid, and he is a stud, and I want you to do a private tryout. And I'm telling you right now, he's going to be a top 3 player on our team. He is so good, blah, blah, blah." My first question to him is, okay, tell me about his parents. And he was like, "What are you talking about?" Well, I want to know what his parents are like, because his parents and their attitude is going to be reflected on the kid.
Of course, yeah.
Is this kid going to come on and be a bully on the field and pick on the other kids on the team because he's new or whatever? Is he going to come in and be rude? So then when I do have a private tryout, a lot of that is, look, you're going to be able to tell if they're good at baseball, but I'm always going to give them something to see if they're coachable. I'm going to ask them questions, and I'm going to tell you right now, if they don't respond with yes, sir, if it's like a yeah, that's a big red flag.
Yeah.
And so going back to hiring people, right? Like I always tell the story about the $5 million producer that was like, "Hey, I've heard great things about Alliant. We're ready to start." And we're like, "No, you don't have a good reputation. We don't care how big your book is. You don't fit our culture."
Yeah.
Same thing. I've kind of extended that to the baseball team. Like, I got 11 kids that are studs. They're all very good at baseball. I'll take another stud, but only if they fit our culture. Mm-hmm. Just because they're good doesn't mean that they need to be on my team.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's when it comes down to, we were having a conversation off camera earlier about the idea of attracting A players and being willing to overpay, but you vet as well, right? It's one thing if they have the ability, but you also vet, check into their background, check into their personality, make sure they're coachable, make sure they're respectful, like you said, all of those things. But if you're attracting them in the employment world, you're probably going to have to overpay potentially for a guy or a gal like that because of that broad skill set they bring. If you do, your organization will benefit because of it, right? You'll probably get that return in value 3 or 4 or 5 times over if you're willing to do that. Again, it sounds like from a macro perspective, that is how Alliant has been set up, right? That is the MO, which I love about that. You wanted to tell me a little bit about the parallels of coaching, though, in your employment. Yeah. I'd love to hear because I understand everything that sports does for a person positively, but what is it specifically about you being a coach for those 2 teams that you bring into your work life that you think sort of transitions and applies there?
Yeah, so I'll answer that question by talking specifically about kids that have come and wanted to play for me, that have come from other really good teams. And, the first question I ask is, you're already on a good team. Why are you leaving? What is it? And, and I'll avoid all the compliments they might say about me or whatever, but ultimately it always gets down to the coaching, right? And the problem is you have a lot of coaches right now that know a lot about baseball. Maybe they might have played professionally, but just because you played professional baseball doesn't mean you know how to coach 8-year-olds. And it certainly doesn't mean you know how to manage the parents. So I think we talked about this earlier. If not, then this is probably one of the biggest points here. It's awesome having extremely talented young children on your baseball team. But guess what comes with that? Parents that also think their kid is the best kid in the entire world, right? So that's one of the things that we've been biggest on in our organization and as a coach is, what are we going to do to make sure that everyone's on the same page? So preseason expectation setting, making sure that everyone's in agreement to what we're trying to accomplish, making sure the kids understand that they have. So I'll give you an example. I had a kid, I subbed as a coach for an older team in our organization. And there was this kid playing first base. And guy hits a ground ball and it went through this kid's legs. And this kid's one of the best players on the team. He doesn't miss ground balls, but it was a big one. And this is a 9-year-old kid at the time. This is a year and a half ago. And he starts crying. And I called timeout and I go talk to him on first base. And I'll leave his name out, obviously, but I was like, bud, I'm not upset with you for missing that. You hit the ball hard. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We're still winning. We're fine. And I said, he goes, oh, what's wrong? He goes, when I get in the car, my dad's going to yell at me. I just couldn't believe it. Yeah. Couldn't believe it. And so that's kind of one of the first things that I sit down and I talk with my parents about is I can't have that. You need to be supportive. Yeah. My kids cannot be out there scared to make errors because their parents are going to yell at them. Oh, yeah. So I said, you got to be supportive. So all these conversations with parents, and that all got derived from my experience as a benefits consulting. When you're going in with the client, you got to set expectations. There's a lot of firms out there, and we talked about this, and obviously I won't name them, but their whole job is just to get the client in the door. Say whatever you want. Sell it, doesn't matter. Once we get them in the door, we'll figure it out. I just couldn't be more against that mentality, right? I hate it. I hate it. It's the worst part about our industry is these salespeople that go in and overpitch and oversell and convince someone that maybe doesn't know exactly what they're doing of something, and now all of a sudden you're preparing yourself for doom. Yep. So expectation setting, speaking calmly, understanding how to manage different personalities. If you can't do that, it's very difficult to be really successful.
When allowing for growth from mistakes, right? Like you can't perceive like the young man that had the ball go through his legs. Like you can't let that one mistake be a defining moment in their lives that they latch onto forever, affects their confidence, right? Maybe decides he doesn't want to play baseball anymore because the kid just can't move on. Like you have to be able to allow your team to be able to make mistakes, understand maybe what they did wrong, right? If you wouldn't be a good coach if you didn't try to show them how to correct it, but then you move on, right? Like you don't overemphasize the mistake to the point that becomes the thing that they can't forget. Otherwise, they're not going to grow, which I think obviously applies in the business world as well. One thing you said to me that I was really interesting, and I hope we can elaborate upon it, is your hope is in the next kind of few years that people, whether or not they work for a different firm or whatever their perception is of you or whatever, that when they go, oh, Alliant, those guys are the best, right? Like you want your peers to have that, to say that about you, right? And there's dozens of great firms, but what is it about that drive that makes you want them to say that? And maybe how do you go about accomplishing that goal?
We're on a mission to partner with the most innovative companies in America to fix health benefits, one plan at a time. NavMD has created a blueprint that delivers world-class benefits to 155 million Americans. Better benefits starts with data intelligence. Our platform is empowering the next generation of advisors to zero in on opportunities to optimize the plan, build the right team, implement proven strategies and solutions. Join us on our journey to revolutionize health benefits. Let NavMD put you a step ahead.
I've referenced him a couple times, and goodness gracious, rest in peace. My dear, dear mentor, who I love so much, Dan Browning, passed away a year and a half or 2 years ago. And my last lunch I had with him and Bill Henry, I'd already left MHBT at the time. Okay. We were at Park City Club, and they sit down and they said something to me, and they said, Jason, you're going to be great at whatever you do. We believe in you. We're so proud of you. Don't ever let anything that comes up in business damage your morals or your reputation. And I've had a number of things that have come up. Candidly, I had an opportunity that came up for a client that was a client of one of my mentors, and they wanted to leave. And I had a moral issue with that. A lot of people would have been like, yeah, because it was about $175,000 in revenue. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so I respectfully had to decline it. What I'm trying to get at is when you go back to culture and you go back to the desire to be liked, I think it goes more to the desire to be respected. And we are so focused on only bringing in colleagues in Dallas that are very respected. So every time we bring somebody on, it is a big splash in the end. Everyone's like, oh, that guy? That guy went there? That guy's amazing. So I wanted there to be like that intrigue. Like, why would this person who X firm that's amazing is a big partner, love them, why would a huge partner with a lot of equity in a really good firm leave to come to Alliant? But they do, and they are. And we can get in the answer some other time, probably not appropriate for a podcast because, again, I don't want it to be an Alliant sales pitch here. But the point being, when you're bringing on people with that type of reputation, it's powerful. And so my goal, specifically what I said was, in 5 years, my goal is that if you ask any benefits consultant in Dallas, other than you and your firm, who's the best consulting firm out there, I want every single person to say Alliant.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that if we do it the right way, then in 5 years, one or two things is going to happen. If you ask that person, they're either going to say Alliant or they're not going to know what they're talking about. Right? That's what I want.
That's fair. I love that. And I think that's a really lofty goal. I think it's a mission-driven goal. I think it's an achievable goal, right? If you guys continue on the path. And again, any other consultant there's a lot of consultants that listen to it. You know, all you're really doing is obviously advocating for your brand, but there's something that you believe in, and you know, there's no fault. I mean, people can disagree and those things, but I think it's good to be well respected by your peers. I think it's good to have healthy competition. I think all those things actually make us better, right? I mean, any given day, maybe an employer chooses somebody else over you, but at scale, right? If that's the belief, and you guys are able to accomplish that, I mean, I wish you best of luck. Why don't you zoom me out, and we'll finish up the podcast a little bit. Okay. Kind of big picture of healthcare, right? I think you have a front row seat at what's going on in our industry. So, what do you think we're going to see over the next couple of years in terms of maybe legislation or changes with the CAA or anything you want to touch on? Give me your view into the crystal ball of healthcare.
Yeah. So one of the really nice things about being at firms that have kind of foresight into the future, meaning they sit on boards. We obviously sit on a lot of major boards and stuff like that. So we are able to get a lot of insight, and that's always very valuable. You have to keep your political preference, need, whatever, out of the world of consulting, right? I mean, you can relate to a client. If you know a client is very liberal or very conservative, you can relate to them. It's fine, whatever. But as far as preparing for the future, you have to prepare for both possibilities, right? Yeah. I always joke around. I joke with my boss all the time and tell him I'm going to be done selling benefits. All I'm going to do from now on is sell everything else that Alliant sells, because two reasons. One, whenever I do that and I bring in the expert, I just sit back and get paid on it. I don't have to do anything. You know, I can go coach my baseball teams and know that someone else is out there making me money. Yeah. You know, all I do is make a referral. That's a joke, but you know, the second the part of it is you have to be able to pivot, right? I really got ramped up as ACA passed.
Okay.
And that was such an inspiration because we did a lot to be on top of that. And so we are preparing for the future of if Democrats stay in office and they decide to start moving more towards the single payer mentality. Alliant's doing a really good job of preparing themselves for that. But let's take that out for a second. Okay. Let's say it moves more towards the direction we think it's going to move, which is your consumer-driven healthcare. I think it's so incredibly important that the consumer understands that they can no longer purchase healthcare in the way that they're purchasing
just blindly swiping the card.
Right, right. You have to go in and start looking at healthcare as something that you're going to be interested in. And plus, it's getting too expensive, right? It's the second largest line item on most P&Ls. So personally, I believe that PPO plans are eventually going to fade out.
Okay.
I believe that I'm a strong proponent of HSA plans right now. I think that the majority of the population, if they know how to use them and they use them as a financial tool, would benefit from being on that platform.
Okay.
I also believe that the BUCAs are going to make a strong push to stay as relevant as they can for as long as they can. So I think you're going to see a big shift in their mentality.
Yeah.
Because right now what you're seeing is a really big innovation push in our industry.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can't, look, I say this in the most modest way. We will leave this podcast and I will have 3 emails from new companies that are wanting to come meet with the Alliant team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, I never even heard of these companies. There's so much money going into the let's carve out this, let's carve out that. Let's get away from a fully insured platform and move to some type of self-funding of some nature where we can control the various parts of it. And I think that that's going to continue.
Okay.
And again, and I'll close the question with this. I chose benefits over P&C because it excited me.
Yeah.
I love the creativity and the customization, the innovation. I do not see that slowing down. I think as long as you're willing to stay on top of it and love it, you can be very successful in this.
Well, I don't see it slowing down either. Not, you risk having paralysis by analysis because there's so many vendors out there. And I even suffer from it on a smaller level when people want to be on the podcast, right? I have to kind of sift through things and I don't know their reputation. I don't know exactly how they stack up. And, you have to sort of evaluate. And I just sort of lean into things that I find interesting and hope the marketplace will dictate whether or not those solutions are viable. But there's so much of it, dude. There's so much innovation that you talked about. There's so much money pumping in through private equity, being in the tech space that I'm in, obviously InsurTech, that you can demonstrate the possibility very easily based on the size of the marketplace and the total attainable market. And so it's very fun, but also it's incumbent upon you to deliver on those results. But it's just, I think our industry has been very, very slow to utilize technology to evolve, and it's catching up. Yeah. COVID, I think, accelerated it.
It did.
It absolutely did, and I'm glad to see it, of course, for selfish reasons. But I also think it's time, right? So you mentioned kind of closing onto that question. Why don't you give me your closing thoughts, though? So let's wrap up the episode, folks that have listened this far. What's something you want them to take away? Yeah,
I mean, I think that my message, I guess, to our industry would be that it's a big pie. We are so lucky to be here in DFW. This is such an amazing market, and it's an amazing place. And I have so many friends that are a part of competitors, and I love them. And we share ideas. We talk about people that, as I said, I was on a trip a couple of weeks ago with a number of brokers from a variety of firms, and the biggest takeaway I had was, tell me 1 or 2 things that you guys are doing that I should be looking at. And because these people like me, they're willing to share it.
Absolutely.
Right? Because they're good people.
Yeah.
I just don't be a competitor, right? We're competing. Just because I say that doesn't mean I'm not going to compete and try to win the business. But I think that there has been previously this sense of holding everything close to the vest.
Absolutely.
And I think if you're really good at what you do and you're a good person, you care about others, I think that, and again, I won't get religious or anything, but I believe that God is going to provide you with the life that you're trying to accomplish if you're not selfish about the way you go about it. So that's kind of my...
Well, I appreciate that. And I think I've heard it quite a bit recently, and I'm aligned with the thought that we're in an industry that has a mission, right? And we're in an industry that's 17% of the total GDP. We're talking trillions of dollars at stake. So there's opportunity, but also there's a bigger picture of what we're trying to solve for. And I think if you wake up every day and that's the way that you approach this, you're going to be taken care of. You're going to have a nice life. But if you do it in a way that serves a bigger purpose, you have an opportunity to do that in benefits that I don't think every industry necessarily has. And so if we approach it that way, I think that's the right way to approach it. And I think we'll also attract new energy constantly to this industry that maybe has previously been somewhat of sort of an unknown, somewhat of a secret in terms of quality of life and impact that you can have. And I have no shortage of waking up and feeling like I'm doing something, especially podcast and plan sites. So I appreciate what you're saying. I appreciate you coming on the episode
thank you,
and
Spencer. It's been
sharing with the world about a little bit more about you and about Alliant. It's great to get to know you over the past few months as well. And I'm sure we'll do a round 2 at some point as well.
I love it, man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
All right, brother.
True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. Check them out at truecaptive.com.